And on my dad's shortwave radio, it's my friend Myra Oliver. How are you?
I am great, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. How
Well,
about you? How are you?
well, I'm good now that you're here. And it's funny because I said you're my friend. I feel like I've known you forever and we've known each other like 5 minutes. But but I have to ask your money story, just overall. You are you somebody that came from money? Did your parents talk about money? Tell us a little bit about you.
No, that would have been so much easier, wouldn't it? But I'm going to tell you the hard way, right? I am actually an ordinary girl from Kentucky, born and raised there, and my parents were school teachers, and both my mom and dad worked two jobs, and they wanted to make sure that we had everything we wanted and not necessarily what we needed. And so growing up, I was a latchkey kid. I'm Generation X, and I was a latchkey kid. Seriously, I was home a lot by myself. And so, I moved from Kentucky to Texas, and I met a Texan and got married, and a policeman, and I was a hairstylist. My grandmother did hair, and of course, my mom and dad. It was either going to be a veterinarian or a hairstylist.
Of
So
course.
you know which one my mom and dad wanted, right? And I chose the other. And but that was my passion and my God-given talent. And so I bought a hair salon at 20 years old in Dallas, Texas. And so I started my first business then. And I my father got really sick with cancer, and I was going back and forth to Kentucky to take care of my dad, and I got in major debt. I mean,
Yeah.
major credit card debt.
Yeah, I want to actually stop there because I want to ask you a couple of
Sure.
questions from your book. Number
Yeah.
one, your mom wrote the foreword. She said that you were so good with money though that she borrowed money from you. She and your dad borrowed money from you. Is that true? Did they borrow money from you?
Oh, all the time, Joe. And I was getting really good interest rates. Let me just say
That's
that.
what she said that. Like you're gouging your mom.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely at a young age, I mean, it was pretty hilarious, but both my brother's sister borrowed money from me and I'm the baby. And my mom would come to me and she'd go, "Hey, I need lunch money for Milton Laura. So can you loan me some money?" And I was always loaning money to them. And I had a little book and I kept up with it and I'd charge them interest. You know,
Nice.
a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do,
That
right?
absolutely. So anyway, but you got into debt and weren't managing money that great. And it sounds like what you were leading to is your dad dying kind of was a wake up call.
It was a wake up call. And it really it helped me realize that I had to stop doing what I was doing because I was digging a hole and the hole was getting deeper and deeper and I wasn't going to be able to get out. And I just decided, and both my husband and I, we sit down. I mean, because we were both limited in our incomes, and I think a lot of people feel this way. I mean, a policeman makes what a policeman makes, right? And someone else tells you your worth. And the same thing for cutting hair. I mean, I was cutting hair crazy. I mean, I was working 12 to 14-hour days, but I was limited in the pricing of what my haircuts were and how many I could do every day. So both of us were limited.
I found it inspirational too, by the way, that you like cutting men's hair, but you switched to cutting women's hair because you figured out you could make more money that way.
Absolutely. And listen, it was all about Pretty Woman and Julia Roberts, and women wanted perms. Everybody wanted curls. So that's what I went to. I went towards, okay, so you do what you got to do, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. So I need to make more money. So I'm going to start doing more color and perms and highlights. And so that's what I ended up doing so that we can make more money. And
You have this phrase. You said you have to be willing to do what others won't to get what others don't have. Where did that come from?
you know, I have been saying that for a long time, and I have always felt that way. In anything that I've done, I just feel like that you've always got to be willing to do what others won't do. to get what you want. I mean, because that's the difference. There's a lot of smarter people out there than me. I have a Kentucky high school education, has worked out beautifully for me. Let me say that. But I will say that, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but the funny thing is, I fail my way forward. I will continue to fail. I will not quit, and I'm going to figure it out eventually. And I think that that's what has put me where I am today, because I'm just not going to quit. I am going to win. Yes, I'm going to fail a lot before I win. And I want people to understand that we're all giving in way too soon. You're almost there. You're almost at the finish line and you're quitting. And that's the thing about money that I found, is that you just have to keep realizing what your purpose is and what your big why, and why are you doing this. And when you know that, nothing can stop you.
Well, you remind me, and you reference Zig Ziglar in your book, and so you already know this quote, but a lot of our listeners don't. There's that whole thing about the old time. My grandparents had one of those old pumps on their farm, and for people who haven't worked with it, have you heard this, Myra, the Zig Ziglar story about the pump?
Yes.
Yeah, and he talks about you have to prime the pump, right? So you pump this, and I remember my brother and I doing this forever when we were kids. You would pump that thing so hard forever, and nothing would happen, nothing would happen, nothing would happen, nothing would happen, and then finally, right, probably just after we would have given up if we didn't know what was going to happen, all of a sudden water starts flowing out. And at that point, you can take one finger and press down on the pump and the water just keeps flowing out and out and out. And I feel like it's kind of an analogy for what you guys did.
Yeah, I love that story. And I had forgotten about that story. So thank you for the reminder, but you're absolutely right. Rick and I just got real purposeful with our money. We realized this is how much money we make. Now, what we do with it is more important than ever.
How did you
when
do that, by the way? What did you cut?
Yeah.
Do you remember specifically what you cut?
I do. So Rick was a policeman. So we lived at first in an apartment, and he traded his time for security at night in the apartment for free rent. But we acted like we were still paying rent. And, there were several things we did. I drove junkers of cars, and I would pull up in my hair salon. I used to get the biggest kick out of this, and I would have to just kind of debrief every day. I'd pull up, and on both sides of me, the girls that worked for me, both of them had brand new cars, right? And at one point, I was driving this old piece of junk Honda that didn't even have a front side seat, right? I had my seat to drive it.
You're like a NASCAR driver.
I'm like a NASCAR driver. I wished I'd have thought of it like that. I would have felt better about it. But it was done like that because it was a courier's car. And so they took the seats out so that they could put all the packages in it. And so anyway, but I was driving that, and I would look at both of them, and they both had new cars. They both wore the finest of clothes and jewelry. And here I was in my Walmart clothes and my old car out front. And I'd go in, and I was making way more money than them. I had more clients. I mean, I was the most successful of the three of us. But I didn't look the most successful, which was great for tips, let me just say, when you're doing hair. Yeah. And that's what I was about. I'm taking this money and I'm going to do something else with it. I had a gentleman that I cut his hair, and he gave me the best advice I've ever had with money. And that advice was, take your money and do a consistent investment in a retirement plan. And then he explained to me about a simplified employee pension.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was self-employed. And I started doing that. And, the exciting thing is I never stopped. I started adding more. And then as years went by, I started making more money. And so because I got into real estate, because I got bored, I mean, I hit my fire number by the age 33. We officially both quit. I sold my hair salon, and my husband quit the police department. And we were retired for 3 years, and we had a blast. I mean, we traveled, we had fun, but I'm a driver, and I'm extremely energetic. And
I couldn't tell. I had no idea.
Well, and I just needed something else to do. So I thought, I'm going to get my real estate license because it seemed like the people we were buying rental property, because we did it through rental property. We bought 10 properties
Yeah.
and we were making about 5,000 a month. And that was our goal for both of us to be able to quit. And so we did that within, it took about 13 years. I mean, it doesn't happen fast. And I think people don't really understand that this is, this is delayed gratification for sure.
Yes. Lay the
So
groundwork one thing at a time.
yes, and it's one house at a time. I started with 500 net a month and then 1,000, and you progress. It doesn't happen like, boom, we went and bought the houses. We're good. Let's go.
Can I,
It's a process.
can I ask you about that first house, the move into real estate? Obviously, two things, as you know, very well, two things beat inflation by a lot: stocks and real estate, right? And so you decided real estate, for the most part, you've got your SEP, so you have some money in stocks, but you decided that real estate was the one for you. And you talk a lot about passive and getting passive investing going. That first house, tell me about getting into that first house. What was the impetus and why did you and Rick decide, you know what, it's time for us to get into real estate?
So the guy financed us. It was $35,000 and he financed us no interest. And so we were living in a free apartment, remember? So this was going to be the first house that we actually moved into and then turned it into a rental after. So our first house we moved into, fixed it up while we were living there, and then we moved out, made it a rental.
So you did a flip, really?
I still own it. I
Well,
have owned it over 30
yeah,
years.
gotcha. You fixed it up and then you rent. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've made over 300,000 in the last 30 years. I paid 35,000 for the house. It's now worth probably about 100 in this market, 200,000.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's kind of neat. And then the next house, I was sitting in that house looking at the newspaper and there was a house for 18,000. And Rick and I, we called the agent. We wrote the contract right there on the spot. And that was our first actual rental. And then we bought several in that neighborhood. And then the coolest thing happened. A lady came while Rick was working on that house, that particular house, the first one. And she didn't speak any English. And so I want to show you what can happen because I think we all put limitations on ourselves. And she came to our country, spoke no English. And so was trying to tell Rick in Spanish, which my husband didn't understand, was trying to tell him that she wanted to buy the house. And Rick was like, no habla, and he didn't understand her. And so she comes back later that afternoon while Rick's still working on the house and brings her son. And he says, my mom has cash and wants to buy your house, and held the paper sack up and asked, how much money do you want for it? And Rick and I were like, it was crazy, but it just shows you. And this woman I pulled her up on our CAD, and she owns like 6 houses in that same neighborhood now.
Yeah.
And she pays cash for every one of them.
That's
and she
funny.
irons clothes.
25
cents.
It's so funny, Myra, that you say that. I had a client when I was when I'm a recovering financial planner. And when I was a financial planner, I had this client who came and within 2 weeks of getting here from Turkey was telling me that he wanted to buy a job. He said, I want to buy a job. So I hooked him up with somebody that helps with resumes, thinking what he really meant was I want to get a job. And he came back and he said, Joe, that was a very nice lady. I really liked her a lot, but you misunderstand me. I want to buy a job. And I realized he's been here 2 weeks, Myra. He has no money. He has no money in the United States, no money. He's got some money tied up in Turkey, but he can't get at it. He has no credit, no money. And he's telling me he wants to buy a business. And within 6 months, and you and I, we hear excuses all the time, right? Within 6 months, he owns a UPS store. Now he owns a chain of UPS stores, but he just like the ability to go get it. I want to go back though, because I really want to dig into a couple of these things. That first house, what was $18,000 was that house?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For that, did you do that no money down? Did you have savings that you put down?
Yes, actually had saved that money, and you're going to die when I tell you this, but we lived in what we call a pier and beam house where it has a crawl space.
Yeah.
And so I would bring my tip money. IRS, don't call me. I would bring my tip money and I would put it, we had a hole in our closet. We dug
Lord.
it. I
No,
swear to you, it's hilarious. We're crazy. But we had saved our money, and that's how we bought that house. Yes, we paid cash for that one.
you paid 18,000 cash for it.
Yes, we did. And the next one was 12.5 because this is in the late 80s, early 90s. And there were so many foreclosures and so many HUD
Yeah.
foreclosures.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there were some really good deals. I mean, we paid 16 for the fourth house. So we bought a lot really low. But they were in areas that were a little scary. And Rick would go, he would wear his uniform and go collect rent. And it worked beautifully for us.
But he'd wear his police uniform.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That would tend to work.
Yeah,
That would tend to work.
it was
But,
very
but,
effective.
but I also think that going into any neighborhood, like you did some research about that neighborhood, right? I mean, you knew the neighborhood. So once you bought one house, you wouldn't have bought a second house if you didn't feel comfortable with the neighborhood.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that you have to do. I was willing to be in that neighborhood, right? I wouldn't personally have lived in that neighborhood, but I was willing to have property in that neighborhood and work towards making that a better place for people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And so it's important, you know, you got somebody has to go in there and clean up houses and make them nice so that it will attract people and give them a great, safe place to live.
you talk about real estate being passive. Um, the interesting thing to me is how do you make it super passive? Because as a landlord, do you have a manager? Do you guys spend time? Because you hear stories from people. You do. I mean, you've been in real estate for a long time. People
Mhm.
talking about tenants that rip a house apart. I know one of my clients when I was a financial planner, they owned a duplex, and the tenant upstairs got upset with the tenant downstairs. So before they left, they stopped up all the drains, let the water run, and it didn't just hurt the tenant downstairs. It obviously made it a horrible mess for my client, the landlord. Like
Right.
how do you make that passive income?
So great question. And it becomes passive when you're willing to turn it over to property management. And if
Okay.
you're not, and I don't advise when you're buying your first couple properties to turn it over to property management. How are you going to learn about the business if you're not in the business? And I think it's just important that you learn so that you can be effective, especially if this is a long term investment for you. Rick, my husband, still manages our properties, but he manages it like this now. I mean, we have a handyman, we have a plumber, we have people because we've been in the business so long and we have so many properties that we can just pick up the phone. Like if one of our tenants calls, like today he had one call and said their shower's leaking. He just calls his plumber goes, takes care of it, and sends us the bill.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's one phone call made. So it's relatively passive. Not as passive as dividend income investing, but
Sure.
it's pretty passive for him just because we've been in it so long. We don't freak out over stuff. We've learned over the years how to take care of things, and yes, honestly, we've had 6 evictions in our 30 years of doing this, which is amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
Wow.
We've had one hoarder, which was pretty bad. That cost us about 5 grand when they moved out to 5 grand to get everything removed from the house.
Oh man.
And so that, you know, that was a bad experience. That's been 20 something years ago. But I can honestly say, if you treat it like a business, it'll pay you like a business, and you got to take care of people. Every home that we have, I would personally live in. And when people have problems or whatever, we take care of it. We're very proactive. We don't let things sit, and that's why I think that we've done so well with it. I mean, now we don't have any vacancy. We haven't had any problems right now with, you know, the moratorium on eviction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We're not having any problem. Everybody's paying their rent for us. We don't raise rents a lot. When we get good tenants, we honor them with, if you take care of our property, because we're about, you know, increasing our value and appreciation too. And you know, and when you keep people happy, you have great success, and it's been very successful for us. I have to say, it truly made us wealthy. Our rental properties.
Well, clearly, I mean, if you're both able to go at 33, I mean, how powerful is that when you have enough income coming in that you can start doing what you want to do instead of what you have to do? I want to,
Right.
I want to shift to something you talked about earlier, which was the two people that work for you with their awesome cars that look like they have more money than you.
Yeah.
You talk about in your book a scarcity mindset versus a growth mindset. And you also talk about, though, about surrounding yourself with the right people, right? You these two people working with you that were probably nice people, but not the right people when it comes to growing your net worth. How did you
Right.
go out and find those right people to surround yourself with, those right messages to surround yourself with to keep going?
That is a great question, and I think it's so important. You're so right. I mean, you are the sum of the five people you spend the most time with. So choose wisely, right? That's what Jim Rohn said. And so, I was also in a network marketing company, and I got to see great people speak, and I surrounded myself with really great leaders. Inside of that network marketing company, I met several powerful public speakers, one being Nito Quabain.
Oh,
And so, I mean, they would bring all these speakers in, and it really got me. It really helped me with my mindset. I mean, I bought, and I hate to say this, but it was cassette tapes at the time, and CDs. But it is what it is.
yeah.
And so I would listen to those over and over again.
I did the
And
same thing. So I'm with you.
yeah. And I just feel like you've got to feed yourself. It's no different than your health, right? And what you eat and all that. You got to feed your mind. And I'm a big believer in affirmations. I still do them to this day. I drove my husband crazy because my husband is very analytical type personality. And so I drove him nuts because on my mirror in the bathroom, it said, I'm going to be a millionaire. And I was planned on being a millionaire by the age 30, but it took till 33. So I didn't quite make my goal, but I made it. That's what counts because I told you I fell for it. And so I mean, I just surround myself. And now today, uh, I really surround myself with really happy, joy filled people, not necessarily wealthy people, because what I've found on my journey is they're not really the happiest. Okay. And sometimes people get so caught up in being and consumerism and trying to keep up with the Joneses or the Kardashians, depending on what generation you're in, but that they don't really they don't really enjoy their lives. And so I have surrounded myself, especially now where I'm at now, because I really want to be around people that are joy filled and that are helping other people and paying it forward. And I'm not chasing success anymore. And I got caught up on that. Okay. So let me be totally transparent. I got caught back in. I got back in working and becoming a real estate agent and had to be number one of that too. And you just get caught back up into that. And then in 2018, well, actually 2016, John Maxwell, I went to one of his seminars and he was sitting there. And I mean, I promise you, Joe, I felt like he was speaking direct to me. I was on the front row, of course, because that's where you learn it all. And I'm on the front row, and he says, that success is great, but significance is where it's at. And I mean, I got chills that day and it never left me. I thought about that all the time. And then in 2018, I just made a decision. I'm going to do everything I've had on my bucket list that I've never stopped to take time to do. And writing a book was one of them. And I'm going to just start. Exercise was another. And I just made a decision and it was the best decision I could have ever made. And I did have to change some of the people I was around because some people you're around them, you tend to go towards more, 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 more. And what I've really discovered, because I can have whatever I want now. I mean, I've built a really great passive income. And I'm at a place in my life that now I realize that I was probably more happy back in the $5,000 a
Isn't that
month
funny?
days.
Isn't that
Yes.
funny? Yeah.
And I'm being really honest. My husband and I have this conversation all the time. When we had worked for that and we were free, right? Free from debt, free from jobs, free from a schedule. With that 3 years, you don't know it when you're in it because you're still thinking, oh, maybe we need more. Or do we have enough? Well, trust me, you have enough. Control your spending. and you have enough. And I just really, we talk about all the time that those were probably some of our best days of our lives. And, and money doesn't buy you happiness.
This hit me hard, like when you wrote that in the book, because, and I just read a Tim Ferriss piece from Inc. where he no longer is trying to optimize everything because he asked, and I'm 52. Yeah, I'm asking myself the same question now, which is these powerful words: to what end? Like, what's the point? If I don't know, the older I get, the more I think there's pieces of my life I still want to optimize, but there's a bunch of my life, Myra, that I used to that I really don't care about optimizing anymore. I just want to
Yes.
enjoy it. Yeah. And when you wrote that,
Yes.
I'm like, she's right there.
Yes. And that is exactly where I'm at. I mean, honestly, I could live in a tiny house
Yeah.
as long as I have Izzy and Rick, because I've read that book. What is it? The Five Biggest Regrets of the Dying.
Yeah. You got to tell everybody who Easy is first.
Oh, Izzy's my chihuahua. She's over on my couch too, sitting there looking at me right now. But Izzy is my chihuahua, and she's just the cutest thing ever. So she's our little girl. She goes on every plane ride with us. She goes everywhere. She's platinum with American Airlines, and so as long as they're with me, because really, when you start asking yourself questions, and what I have found is when you start asking yourself what gives you joy, you're going to find none of it is related to money. And that is fascinating. And none of us sit down and take the time to really, really evaluate that. And that, I think once you start doing that, you start realizing, and I coach some people that are, my generation, and they're moving forward towards retirement and stuff. And they got caught up on that treadmill of success or money, and they're realizing it. There's so many people realizing it. And I'm going to tell you, the millennials have already figured it out. They're way ahead of us. They figured out that they rather have experiences than stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm so proud of them. And so that's another reason that I think the book really hits home, because I think that when people realize that money can only buy you stuff, it's the relationships in your life that really will fulfill you. And that's just where I'm at in my life. And it's just really interesting because I drive a 5-year-old car. My husband said to me the other day, he goes, let's go buy you a new car. I go, why? Mine still smells new when you get in it. I mean, come on. Why? More do you need? I laugh. One of my girlfriends sent me a picture of a purse she was going to buy. And I sent her back, of course, and this is why she sent it to me. I sent her back. I said, I'd rather have the money that you're getting ready to pay for that purse in my wallet. And she sent me back. She goes, you said exactly what I thought. I'm not buying it.
Bam.
You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
her other friend said, oh my gosh, you've got to have that. Get it in 2 colors. Right?
Absolutely.
So I get to be that friend that people call when they need that compass, that
Getting you off
that
the
spending
ledge.
compass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, everybody's different, and I think when you can afford it, you don't necessarily want it anymore. I think
Is
that's part of it too.
I think that completely is. What I really like about the book is that you take us all through not only your own journey, but you help people with their budget, getting their foundation in order, telling the stories about some of the mistakes that you and Rick made so that people don't make the same mistakes. The book is called Down Home Money, A Simple Approach to Financial Freedom. And where do we get it, Myra?
You can get it on Amazon, and in a couple weeks, Audible will be out on Amazon. So that'll be
Awesome.
great. And so please do. And then I have a YouTube channel, Down Home Money. And it's a YouTube channel. And I just, it's once a week. It's very casual. But I think that everybody needs a friend that they talk to once a week when they're on a financial journey, especially when they're trying to reach financial independence. I think it's cool to have a friend that you can just tune into for 8 to 10 minutes a week, who's just going to remind you why you're doing this, because there are big things happening on the other side of this, right? And I think that you got to have that friend, phone a friend. So I just tell people, dial me up on down on money, and I will be glad to be that friend if you haven't got one. Because what I find is the people I talk to say that the hardest part is that they're friends that are not doing, they're not saving their money or not working towards this. They kind of pull them back in,
Yep.
to spending. And so they kind of need that person going, it's okay if just say no.
You are the people you surround yourself with, like you said earlier. Myra, thanks for taking a few minutes. By the way, everybody, I'll link to Myra's YouTube channel, to the book, to everything that we talked about today on our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com. Myra, thanks so much for taking time and talking to us. I really appreciate it. That's
It's been
some
a lot of
powerful
fun.
stuff.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.